Hey everyone, today I'm going to be changing the gear oil in the rear differential of my Ford Ranger. I'm going to be honest, I hate changing fluids in cars. While it's not terribly difficult to change any of the fluids, it's a messy job and it's kind of boring. I'd much rather be replacing parts or doing some sort of modification, but unfortunately, maintenance is really important, and I know that the rear differential fluid in this truck has never been changed. The good news is, although I'm doing this on this Ranger, this is broadly applicable to pretty much anything with a solid rear axle, where you have to remove the differential cover to drain the fluid, put the cover back on, and refill. So I'll walk you through step by step. So first things first, we're going to need a few tools and supplies. You're going to need whatever gear oil or fluid that your differential calls for. If you have a limited slip or a locker, you might need some sort of friction modifier. Have a transfer pump to get the fluid from the bottle into the differential. I have some RTV for making a new gasket between the cover and the differential. Make sure that you get something that is oil resistant. I've always used black. It's always worked well for me. I have brake parts cleaner for everything. I'm going to use it to clean out the cover, to clean out the differential a bit. Sometimes the cover gets a little stuck on. You can smack it with a mallet or a dead blow, and that can help loosen it. Chances are I'm going to have to hit something. Some towels for cleaning up. I like to use a little angle grinder with a surface prep pad to remove the old gasket material. If you don't have one of these or the pneumatic equivalent, you can get by with a gasket scraper. And then you're going to need something to remove the bolts that hold on the differential cover. I'm going to try out this impact driver. If it doesn't work, I'll just go back to ratchet and socket. That's never failed me. Finally, you're going to need something to catch all the fluid in, just a trusty catch pan, and you'll be good to go. So let's dive on in. Okay, so I'm under the truck and we're looking right at the differential cover. You can see that it's held on by a series of bolts around the outer perimeter, and all we need to do is remove all of these bolts, and then we can get the cover off, which will allow the fluid to drain down to our catch pan. Now, before we begin, I always like to remove the fill plug. I've seen cases before where the fill plug is seized or you can't get it out, and you don't want to end up in a situation where you've drained all the fluid and you have no way to put new fluid back in. Now, I know on the Jeep Dana 35 rear axle, there's a plastic plug in the cover that just pops out. I think the Dana 44 has a screw-in plug. And on this Ranger, the fill plug is actually on the other side of the differential. Okay, so we have a fill plug here. And to get this fill plug out, we just need to take a 3/8 inch ratchet and put it in there and get it out. If we can get this plug out, we'll go ahead and start removing the cover to drain the old gear oil. All right, so I've just got my ratchet with a small extension on it, and this fill plug is indeed loosening, so that is a great sign for today. You also want to make sure you're parked on level ground. We can see fluid coming out. There's a little bit of metal shavings on the fill plug magnet. I'm not too concerned because some of this could have just been from factory break-in. I'm going to go ahead and just wipe this down with a towel, hit it with some brake parts cleaner, and we'll start removing the cover. All right, so now we're at the spot where we need to remove the bolts that hold on the cover. So the entire cover is surrounded by bolts. We want to leave the top one in but loose because that'll hold the cover on while we are getting most of the fluid drained, and it will make less of a mess. See if a little more power gets me there. Oh, sweet. So I'm using my new to me M12 fuel 1/4 inch impact driver with a little adapter to get a socket on. And from experience, this is a lot nicer than doing all these by hand. So I'm just zipping these on out. This thing's nice and compact. It fits in here really well. No. And you'll see a little tag on most diff covers that show your gear ratio. So you can put that back in or leave it off, it's up to you. Break out a ratchet and do this the old-fashioned way. All right, and the only one left is the one on the top. And remember, we're gonna just loosen this one. We're not gonna take it all the way off. That way the cover can kind of stay in place as the gear oil drains out. All right, so that's loose. And we can pull the catch pan under, and chances are this isn't gonna budge because the RTV from the factory is holding everything in place. Okay, so I have a small plastic pry tool, and I'm going to try to use this because it's less likely to mar the surface. But if this doesn't work, I can use a flathead screwdriver and just be very careful not to scratch the surface of the cover or the differential housing. Oh, this has a little pry tab here. Okay, so this is nice. I can actually come in from this side and hit this with a punch to get this off. I'm just going to take my screwdriver and hold it there. And there we go. We can see the fluid starting to come out. I know I did not scratch the surface because I hit a part of the cover that is not actually mated to the diff housing. And now I'm going to try to come in here with the pry tool and open this thing up and let that nasty looking fluid out. And so what we'll do is just let this drain long enough that most of it's out. With that top bolt, we didn't make a huge mess. All right, so that's good. And now we can finish getting that top bolt out. I'm just going to brace this with my hand so it doesn't fall into the catch pan. Okay, now all the bolts are clear and we can remove the cover completely. And we're going to need to take this cover out to clean it. So I'm going to go ahead and just remove it out of the way and we will get this prepped to go back on. Now that the cover has been removed, we need to clean the inside. So I'm going to take some rags, spray it down with some brake parts cleaner, and then we need to clean off the old gasket from the edge of the surface that mates to the differential housing. So I'll start by just starting to wipe some of this. And gear oil is some pretty nasty stuff in terms of how thick it is and how hard it is to clean. Okay, I'm going to step away for a second and just spray this down with some parts cleaner. Okay, so I hit this with some parts cleaner. I was able to just peel off a lot of the old gasket by hand, but there's still a little bit left, and what we need to do is we want this surface to be as clean and smooth as possible. So I've got a surface prep pad on my angle grinder, and I'm going to take this and I'm just going to go around the edges, and then I'm going to spray it with parts cleaner one more time just to have a nice dry clean surface. All right, that looks really good. I'm gonna go spray this again with some parts cleaner, wipe it out, and just let it dry thoroughly. And after I've done that, I'm gonna go ahead and repeat the same process for the differential housing. We need both surfaces to be clean and dry before we mate them together with the RTV sealant. Okay, now that all the gear oil has been drained and the surfaces have been cleaned and our cover's prepped, surface on the differential housing's been prepped, it's time to add a coat of RTV, our gasket maker. So I'm gonna go ahead and just pull this out. Just poke a hole in the cap. It has the little doohickey to do that. And put on the little tube. Boom. So I'm going to just take off the tip so that we can squeeze out a bead of RTV. The tip has been cut off. And what we want to do is just create a nice even bead around the cover. So I'll just start at the top, and we're just going to go right in the center. Okay, so now we have the RTV all the way around the cover, and note that around the bolt holes we do just a little circle of RTV around, and this is going to ensure that we get a nice good seal. While the RTV is still wet, we need to put this cover back on the differential housing and just finger tighten all the bolts. The packaging material says let this set up for about an hour before torquing the bolts, and then it says let it set 24 hours before adding fluid. Note, when I used to do this in the shop, we never waited 24 hours, and knock on wood, I've never had one of these leak, but I'll let it set up for a couple hours before I add the diff fluid. So let's go ahead and get this back on the differential. Okay, so we want to make sure that the surfaces that this is going to mate to are completely dry. We're now to where oil's not really coming out, so I just want to give this one quick little wipe. Give it a little squirt of some braking parts cleaner to just dry it off so that it's not oily. Give it one more little wipe. And then we're going to take the cover and just put it in place. Line up the bolt holes. There we go. All right, and so now all of my bolts are in place, and I'm just going to go through and snug these up, but not really tighten them. And much like a tire, I'm going to kind of go in a crisscross pattern to avoid warping the cover. And if everything goes well, you should see a little bit of the RTV coming out of the edges. So we'll let this set up for about an hour, and then we're going to come back and tighten all of these bolts. All right, the last step in this little adventure is just adding fluid back to your rear diff. I've got the pump added to my bottle of gear oil. I'm going to see if I can position this somewhere to get this hose inside of the diff. Push that in there and just start pumping. And we're going to fill this until gear oil starts to run out of the fill hole, and then we will put the fill plug, or the plug for the fill hole, back in place, thereby securing everything. And look at how nice and clean that gear oil looks. So much cleaner than what came out. This differential is going to be so happy. While I'm down here, I should probably remove this little dirt dauber nest too, but I don't think it's hurting anything. And then what I'll also do is I'll clean up all this residue on the oil with some brake parts cleaner. That way I can be on the lookout for any potential leaks, but it should be good to go. And you'll want to keep your catch pan under this while you're doing it, because fluid will run out of this hole. Got about a quart down. I'm going to just raise this up and see how it's looking. Sometimes your hose can block it from running out. We are not there yet. Let's check it again. Not quite. Getting close. And that's what we want to see. So when I start to wipe this away, we can see that the fluid starts running back out. So that means the fluid is flush with this line right here, and you can kind of stick a pinky in and kind of feel. That's a lot of grime, but just for giggles, I'll put in one more pump, and then I will get the fill plug, and we can wrap this thing up. Got a quick little wipe, and we can see it start to weep back out, which means it's right where we want it. Yeah, put my finger in, I can feel gear oil. I'm just going to take the plug and thread this back in.
And we just want this snug. We don't need it like super tight. You don't need to crank it into to the point where you're not going to get it off. So once it feels snug and secure, that's all there is. So like I said, I'm going to hit this with a little bit of brake parts cleaner, clean up the oil residue. That way, if it does leak in the future, I can keep an eye on it, but it should be good to go.
All right, I know that wasn't the most fun job, but at least I can rest assured knowing that I've got clean gear oil in my rear axle. I hope you found this video informative, and until next time, I'm Ben with Grubbs Garage.